In episode 7, Ragavi immediately starts to work on Mark, trying to have him regain consciousness. After examining him for a bit, she tells Devin he'll be okay. I mean, there might be some deficits, but hopefully nothing long term. And Devin asks her, "Are you a doctor?" She then tells her that Mark's going to sleep for a while. Hard to say how long, but she's going to need to grab some equipment from downstairs, which is really puzzling to Devin. Devin still doesn't know who Ragavi is. She doesn't know if Ragavi's a doctor, and she certainly doesn't know why Ragavi has equipment in Mark's basement. Devin has a lot of questions, and Sal tells her, "Your brother's reintegrating," which Devin loses it over. She says, "No, he's not. Clearly, he's not. We're not going to discuss this later. It's over." And a very calm Ragavi tells her, "It's what he wants." Devin snaps back. What he wants is to know whether Gemma's alive or not, and Ragavi cuts her off and says, "She is." And as Sal goes and grabs the equipment, Devin processes the fact that her sister-in-law is actually alive. When morning hits, Mark is still sleeping. Sal hooked him up to an IV, and she tells Devin he's stable. It was an isolated event, and he's journeying now. There's a lull in the conversation, and Devin says, there's an innie cabin. I mean, technically it's a cottage, but it's a place where severed people become their innies. And there was this woman, and Sal cuts her off and says, "It's the Demona birthing retreat." Devin stands up and says, "So if we go to that cabin, maybe Mark can talk to his innie," but a very agitated Sal tells her, "They're two completely different things." She picks up some of the equipment and tells her, "This is how you get Gemma out," which Devin starts to push back on because she feels like all that equipment just almost killed her brother. Devin then comes up with an idea to call Harmony Cobell. Now, Sal thinks this is a horrible idea because, as she tells Devin, "Harmony runs the severed floor. What are you doing?" But Devin tells her, not anymore. I mean, maybe she knows how to get in the cabin. Maybe she knows what happened to Gemma. And Sal screams at her, "That woman is Lumen through and through. She was raised by them. She's a soldier who will turn you over to them. We just have to resume the treatment as soon as he wakes up." But Devin feels like ultimately it's up to her because it is her brother. So when she says, "I'm going to call her," Sal shakes her head and says, "You know what? Then I can't be here." That wasn't something that Devin was banking on. With the threat of Sal leaving, she knows that she can't handle this on her own, and she begs Sal to stay, but Sal says, "No, I can't. This was your decision. But whatever you do, don't call that woman." She considers it, but then she hears Mark start to talk. It's faint. It's enough to keep Devin from calling Harmony. And hours later, Mark finally does wake up. Now, where was he the entire time? Well, he certainly was journeying, as Sal put it. He was going through his life with Gemma, from start to finish. Their first meeting at a blood donation center, them getting married, Gemma finding out she was pregnant, Gemma unfortunately having a miscarriage, small fights, and then ultimately the final night with Gemma, where she went out and she never came back. Devin asks him, "Mark, where did you go?" And when Mark thinks about it, all he can think of is Gemma's face. And he starts to cry. But you do find out where Gemma is. She is deep inside Lumen. And I'm talking it's Gemma. It's not Miss Casey. She's held up in a tiny, tiny apartment, all by herself. She goes through a battery of tests in the morning to make sure she's healthy and of sound mind. And then she finds out from the nurse who is administering these tests that she'll be going to 6 rooms that day. She then goes to get dressed, and it's a prearranged outfit for her, but when she sees it, she says, "Oh, shit." Because it seems like she knows that the itinerary for that day, well, it's not her favorite. She then gets dressed and passes a bunch of rooms that were project names. One of those rooms is Cold Harbor, but she doesn't go in there. She goes into another one, but when she steps in, she has the same reaction that Mark has and everybody else has when you go in the elevator. Although it doesn't seem like it's Miss Casey. It seems like it's another kind of innie. And this particular innie does not want to go through what she's about to go through. It seems to be a simple dentist appointment, and it's administered by a guy named Dr. Maurer. Dr. Maurer was, in fact, the person that picked up the dentist equipment and went down the black hallway with the elevator that Irving kept picturing. Gemma is forced to go through this dental procedure, and when she exits, she asks the nurse, "How long was I in there?" And the nurse tells her 2 hours. Gemma's every move, though, is being monitored from a control room with 4 people. and it seems like her every move since she entered Lumen has been monitored. All the progress with all these projects, her interactions with Mark. The head of all this appears to be Mr. Drummond, who meets with Dr. Maurer. They're looking over some security camera footage of Gemma walking down a hallway, and Drummond asks him, are the severance barriers holding? To which Maurer says yes, the technology is working. Drummond mentions how it's pretty obvious Maurer likes Gemma, to which Maurer says, yeah, I do. She's easy to like. She's fond of me too. Which Drummond finds funny. He asks him, didn't she try to break your fingers? So the whole Gemma being fond of this doctor, that's up for debate. At the end of the day, Maurer meets with Gemma and asks her, how are you feeling? Where Gemma lets him know that her mouth hurts, and he asks, what room did that to you? Gemma lets him know. She also lets him know how many rooms she visited that day. She doesn't remember anything that happened in those rooms, though. He then asks her how she felt in the hallway, if she exited any of those rooms feeling despair, fervor, gaiety. Gemma doesn't answer the question, though, pointing out that there's only been one room she hasn't been to yet, and today she noticed it had the name Cold Harbor. She then asks him, what happens when I've been in all the rooms? And he says, you will see the world again, and it will see you. She asks him, does that mean I'll see Mark? But he tells her, Mark will benefit from the world that you are siring. Kier will take away all his pain, just like Kier has taken away all your pain. A very frustrated Gemma speaks for the entire audience by asking him, can you just speak like a normal person? But he just tells her, good night, and he leaves. You get a look at some of the rooms and experiments that her innie is going through. One of them involves her being in a plane crash. The other involves her writing countless thank you cards from Christmas. And all of these experiments have Dr. Maurer in it in some way or another. As the days go on, though, the control room, i.e. Drummond and Dr. Maurer, notice that Cold Harbor is stuck at 96%. Drummond has a pretty good idea of why this is. He feels like the nosebleeds have set them back. And then he tells Maurer, you know when we're done, you're going to have to say goodbye to her, right? And Maurer confirms, yes, he is aware. And then they both say, for Kier. Much like Mark, while he's journeying, Gemma spends most of her nights just remembering the life she had with him. But she's getting increasingly sick of being stuck in this life. So one night, when Dr. Maurer comes to visit her, she decides to fight back. It doesn't initially start like that, though. She tells him, I want to go home. And he lies to her. He tells her that Mark remarried last year and he has a 1-year-old daughter. And Gemma doesn't believe it. But he sticks with this lie and tells her he's moved on. He then poses the question, maybe you've moved on in one of the rooms? And it is worth mentioning that the Christmas card room, he was pretending to be her husband. He continues on, saying, maybe you're gravitating towards one room. Maybe you've felt things about one room behind closed doors like you've never felt with Mark before. Maybe I've even seen it. That's when Gemma hits him over the head with a chair, stealing his key card and fleeing. She's chased by a nurse, but she's able to get in the elevator right before the nurse catches up to her. Unfortunately, when she goes up in that elevator, it's not Gemma. Gemma turns into Miss Casey. And when Miss Casey arrives in that long, dark hallway from the elevator, she is very confused. But she starts to make her way down, and that's when the door flies open, and it's Milchick. Miss Casey asks him, what's happening? And Milchick tells her that her Audi came in for a public art exhibition and took the wrong elevator. He then tells her to just turn around and head back the way she came. So she does that. She gets in the elevator, she heads down, and when the elevator doors open, Gemma is back, realizing that she wasn't able to escape. She's devastated, because all she wants is to be with Mark.
Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.